Okay there, everybody. Welcome back. So this is going to be the last video in our installment of videos on Introductory Econometrics. And in this video, we're going to be talking about experimental methods in economics, panel data, and then just a little bit about fixed effects and modeling. Now, as we all know at this point, this is a series of lectures on Introductory Econometrics, right? So just getting started in econometrics. And these last three videos have really been extensions of that basic regression model. And in this last video, we're just going to be touching upon these topics. So if you're looking for an introduction into some of the terminology as well as some of the uses of experimental methods in economics, this may be the video for you, right? If you're looking for more advanced explanations of how to do these models, right, or of the theory or mathematics behind these models, this probably isn't the video for you. Okay, so let's hop right into that. So it may be surprising to know, but the use of regression analysis for experiments and experiments of this sort of type in economics are relatively new. Okay, certainly if we go back 40 years, this wasn't really done, and even 20 years ago would have been very, very unusual to do this sort of work. Now, when we think of sort of experimental methods, usually what comes to folks' minds first off is these ideas here: random assignment experiments, excuse me, where we have a set of individuals that's assigned to a control group and another is assigned to a treatment group. So you might think of, like, say, drug testing, right, where a group of individuals during the drug test get the treatment drug and another group gets a placebo, or maybe nothing at all, depending upon the experiment. Okay. Now, in this case, the estimated relationship would look something like this, where we have a series of control variables, in this case x2, x3, right? And then it may be binary. We may have a treatment variable. 1, they got the treatment. 0, they didn't. Okay? And then we're going to look at the outcomes, in this case y, and we're going to estimate how the incidence of that treatment marginally impacted outcomes. Okay? So again, that's sort of normally what we would we sort of think of, right? We think of like how we sort of would do these experiments. In economics, however, it's pretty rare to do experiments like this. It's not that it doesn't happen, but it's rare because, first of all, random samples can be difficult to obtain and maintain. Right? So people want to do their things, right? The idea is sort of you're going to hold them steady while you do an experiment. Keep them in this group, so this person never does that and this person always does that. Be very difficult, right? As you might imagine. Second, problems of heterogeneity, that is, this failure to include all irrelevant factors. So did we fully control with our other variables? Well, economies are big, they're complicated, a lot of moving parts and a lot of sort of things coming and going. And if we fail to control for meaningful variables, then our estimated relationship is going to be somewhat unsound. Okay. Third, participant-observer problems. So a few things here, right? First off, if we're running an experiment on a group of individuals, right, how do we ensure that our experiment is unknown to them, right? Because if they know we're experimenting on them, and you can see the last one there, right? If they know we're experimenting on them, the outcome isn't going to be the same as it would otherwise be. So, for example, if I have a group of employees doing something that's designed to enhance their productivity and another group that isn't doing that thing, it's going to be difficult to keep them from talking to each other, right? It's going to be difficult for them to not wonder what's going on. It's going to be difficult for them to continue to do their job as they would do otherwise, right? So my experiment itself ends up biasing my results, okay, potentially, right? So there's a lot more that could be said about this. It's obviously a serious concern. I think we'll leave it there for brevity's sake. Okay. Finally, as you can already get from everything I've said above, there are serious ethical problems with doing experiments of this sort in economics. In economics, we're dealing with real people's lives and livelihoods. Okay, and that's not something to be taken lightly. And the idea that we should sort of toy with people's lives or potentially damage their livelihoods for sake of experiments, extremely unethical. And it's not something that a person would do. Well, what ends up happening more often than not in economics, certainly the source of a lot of work, is natural experiments. Now, you might say, well, the economy's not natural, and I would agree with you. We create it, right? We make it every day. So it's not really natural in that sense. But certainly there are events that effectively assign individuals into control and treatment groups. Pandemic, right? Happens to some people, doesn't happen to other people, not because we were running an experiment, right? Just because of the way things played out. Okay. And so in this case, we may have something like what we look here, or we may estimate something like we have here, where we have a series of controls, and excuse me, there's a typo there. It should be x2, not x1i. Okay, so we have a series of control variables, x2, x3, x4, so on and so forth, right? And then we have a treatment, which is where these are individuals or sets of individuals that have experienced our event, and then we have the other group that did not receive the treatment, right? And so perhaps those that were a part of this receive a 1, right? And the rest do not. This is 0, so sort of a binary choice in this case. And then from that we have a change in y, right? So change in y would be the change in economic occurrences for the treatment group versus the non-treatment group, okay? Now, in this case, beta 1 is referred to as a difference in difference estimator, or sometimes called a diff and diff. Tim, that's for you if you're watching. Okay. Why? Okay, because we have a difference, okay, change in y. So there's economic outcomes here, there's economic outcomes there. They're different, they've changed, change in y, change in our dependent variable. And then we want to know the specific difference within that difference associated with the treatment. Right, so events have changed. How much of that change is due to change in this treatment, okay, or the occurrence of the treatment? Okay, so it's a difference inside of a broader difference. Okay, so difference in difference estimate. Okay, hey there everybody. So this is Editor Kemp breaking into your regularly scheduled explanation of difference in difference estimators. So I thought I would record a quick edit here. Okay. Imagine, to understand what we're doing here, imagine that you're on a moving train, okay, and that now you are walking, you're on that train, you're inside the train, and you're walking towards the front of the train, okay. In this case, the train is moving and you are moving, okay. If I'm going to look at the speed of your movement across the boards against the movement, along the Earth, okay. And so what our difference in difference estimator is doing is taking account of the movement of the train to look at the difference that your walking is making. So the difference based upon the idea that the economy, the train, doesn't stop while the experiment's going. It's continuing to move. Okay? And then so how is our treatment, the difference inside of the difference, what effect is that actually having? So how fast are you walking inside of the moving train? All right, I'll return you to your scheduled program. Thanks, everybody. These are becoming quite popular in economics, particularly in the last several years. The methodology is quite developed at this juncture. I'm speaking to you in early 2021. I expect it to continue to develop. So those of you who are just starting out in economics, I expect this to continue for some time and the methodology to continue to develop. So let's move on sort of the end then. That's this panel data. Now, panel data is quite common, and so it may seem as kind of odd that we're finally getting to it here at the end, right? But it's because it's a little more complicated, okay? And what panel data does is it combines time series and cross-sectional elements. Now, we've talked a lot about cross-sectional data in this series and a little bit about time series data in this series, but we've not put them together. Now, in this case, our notation looks something like this, where we have an I, which is our cross-sectional element, and T, which is our time series elements. Okay, now you might be thinking, well, what is this? Okay, well, imagine that we have data over several years across several U.S. states. Now, for those of you in the rest of the world, the United States has 50 states. Imagine we have data, 1990, 1991, 1992, 93 for Alabama. And then we have 90, 91, 92, 93 for Alaska. And then we have 91, 90, 91, 92, 93 Arizona, and so on through all the 50 states alphabetically. This is panel data. Okay, so we've got a cross-sectional element, state, 50 states. Okay, and we've got a time series element, years, early 1990s. Okay, now in this case we have variables that can change over individuals, cross-sectional element, okay, or state, or time. Okay. Now with panel data, sort of all the complications that we've talked about with time series analysis are of course pertinent, as well as some of the cross-sectional issues that we've also discussed. Issues of non-stationarity, trending, so on and so forth, time series problems are pertinent, right? So in this way, they're some of the most complicated data sets, types of data sets that we can employ. So when you're entering panel data into, say, Stata or eViews or SPSS, you need to let the software package know that it's panel data, right? So, and as you're walking through the sort of import wizard or whatever your package is calling it, identifying both cross-sectional and time series elements in there is important. So as you're doing that, don't just hop through it quickly like you might with a simple cross-sectional data set. Make sure you're paying attention and make sure you're helping your software package to correctly identify the various aspects of the data you're trying to bring into it. Okay. Now that we sort of appreciate sort of the additional complexities of panel data a little bit, let's quickly introduce this idea of fixed effects models. Now, fixed effects models are also becoming, well, it's a little older idea, but they've been around for a little while, but very commonly employed in econometric analysis. And what this is a way of doing is allowing us to isolate various cross-sectional elements of our model, and then to generate a way to fairly and effectively compare things to each other. So for example, we think about our 50 states in the United States. Wisconsin, where I'm from, is very different from, say, Florida, okay, or Texas. The climate's different, the economies are different, even the way people speak English is a little different. And so if we try to put all of those states into a sort of one estimated relationship, we're going to be forcing the data to sort of produce an estimated relationship that's consistent for all of those, okay, all 50 of those. By employing so-called fixed effects, let's say we were employing fixed effects for states, cross-sectional element, okay, what we are then doing is allowing the estimated relationship to make an adjustment for each of the 50 states. That is, to come to an estimated relationship for each state, then to identify the variances between those states, if I may loosely employ that term, and from that to produce a correction by which we can estimate one single relationship across all 50 states, allowing each of the 50 states for their own differences. Okay, so we're going to fix those cross-sectional effects. Now the notation becomes more complicated yet. EF here are cross-sectional fixed effects, and TF are time series fixed effects. The alphas and rows there are just estimators associated with those, and then you also see the betas and the x's. There are other control factors beyond the cross-sectional or time series elements that we're fixing. Okay. If you want to think about this, you might think about, sort of a data as a circle or something like this. And what we're going to do is we're going to slice through the data and allow each slice to have its sort of own estimated relationship, okay, while combining, bringing them all back together in a single estimated relationship. If you're thinking like, geez, it seems like, we're creating a lot of variables here, isn't this eating into our degrees of freedom? Yeah, absolutely, right? So there's a cost and a benefit associated with the employment of these fixed effects, whether they be cross-sectional or time series. in that you are eating up degrees of freedom, potentially a lot of degrees of freedom. So 50 states, right? You're losing 50, right? Or 49. Okay. So while you do gain the sort of allowance for allowing each state, in my example, to tell its own story, which is big, right? That's a big benefit. There is a cost to that in losing degrees of freedom and potentially losing so many that you hinder your analysis in other respects, right? So in employing fixed effects models, having large data sets is very helpful. Okay. All right. Well, that's it for this time, folks. I really enjoyed making this series of videos on introductory econometrics. I hope you've learned a thing or two. I'll put the whole playlist in the description below. But yeah, it's been fun. I hope you thought so too. Anyway, I'll be starting the next series here pretty soon. So if you're looking forward to another one, that'll be coming along in just a few weeks. All right. Take care, everybody. Have fun.